Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is York Baur, who is the CEO of MoxiWorks. York, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Great to be here.
Yep. Awesome. Well, it's great to have you. I guess let's start at the beginning here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, of course, what MoxiWorks is and how you became the CEO there.
Sure. Well, I'm a repeat offender. I'm a serial entrepreneur software guy. Started with a computer science degree way back 40 years ago and wound my way through 12 other tech companies before I ended up at MoxiWorks. And, the usual kind of path you might imagine. Never stayed longer than 4 years in any of those other roles because that's how it goes in tech. But I have been CEO of Moxie now for a decade. So as I like to joke, I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid. Apparently, I've graduated to making it now. So how I came though to Moxie was I have a pretty broad set of experience, everything from Microsoft down to my own little startups and so forth, and everything in between. So I've seen the movie a bunch of times, and in particular along the way, I had a ability to work in a number of family-owned, entrepreneur and family-owned businesses, and so that background came in handy when I got recruited to run Moxie, because Moxie didn't start life as many technology companies do, with the garage founder and then the seed round and the A round and the B round. It was a spin out actually of a technology unit within a real estate brokerage here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm based in Seattle, named Windermere Real Estate, and Windermere had decided that they wanted to spin this thing out for reasons I'm happy to describe, and was looking for a software experienced CEO. And that search resulted in me joining, also because I had experience with what was then still a family-owned entity. The Jacoby family that owns Windermere owns, or at that time, I should say, owned the 100% of the equity in MoxiWorks.
So was this an application that they really built for their own purposes first?
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting path. I think real estate's a weird animal. As I mentioned with my career, I kind of have done a lot of different things in software, and through that you end up selling. Almost all of it was enterprise with some detours into the consumer side. But on the enterprise side, I'd sold pretty much to every other industry there was except real estate. But residential real estate is very different. As a beast, it kind of marches to the beat of a different drummer, because the consumer and we've all bought and sold houses. I'm sure most, if not all, on this podcast have. It is a non-fungible asset, meaning that no two homes are the same, so you can't automate it to the same degree. And secondly, it's the most emotionally and financially significant transaction that most consumers will ever do. Right. And so all of those things mean it's heavily dependent on a great agent and a trust relationship between the consumer and that agent, not unlike you with your doctor, by the way. I think there are a lot of parallels that the medical profession has. And what I'm leading up to is technology moves much more slowly in the real estate industry because of this. So by way of background, Windermere was actually super early. So here's a fun cocktail party fact for you. Windermere.com, the domain Windermere.com, was registered by Windermere in January of 1995. So this is super, super early. And Windermere then went on to build a number of other technologies on a platform called Cold Fusion. You may recall that one from the way back.
I remember that name. Yeah. Yeah.
Things like CRM and presentation products, things agents need to work with consumers around, and built quite a lead in the market. Windermere is very early in this and really saw what the role that technology could play in helping agents be more productive. And so in the mid-2000s, they took their foot off the gas because technology is expensive and they're a brokerage. There's no reason to overinvest. And then in the downturn, actually right before the downturn in 2007, Redfin and Zillow showed up here in Seattle. I mean, Seattle was the testing ground for those companies. That's why they were founded here. And so through the downturn, the Great Recession, Windermere was smart enough to recognize that what was this internal technology unit building technology for a single brokerage really should be spun out to live its life as a standalone software company for a variety of reasons. One is you could afford to fund it more, and there was a recognition that the cost of technology for the next phase of the real estate market was going to go up because of competition from the likes of Redfin and Zillow and others. Second reason was to have it live its life truly as a software company. Brokers don't know how to run software companies. I don't know how to run a brokerage, right? It's a different thing. And we can talk about that. Because talk about a difference in business model, subscription versus transactional. That's about the ultimate example. Yep. And then thirdly, so that the products would get better faster because you'd be getting input from a broad market, not just a single customer. And that proved to be very clairvoyant, I would say. And kind of the rest is history. When I showed up 10 years ago, Windermere was still the only customer, and there was no codified product strategy for the broader market. So that was job one. But the point is, it was really based on, and this was a huge win at my back, to be honest. I was able to inherit a lot of the thinking and experimentation and work that had been done to that point. We ended up, of course, building a new product strategy, new technology, et cetera. But still, the knowledge of what had been done was incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people would agree, but some of the best software I've ever used was created by somebody who created it out of necessity, right? They did it to solve their own problem and then thought, hey, I could productize this and bring it to market. But that sometimes comes with its own set of challenges as well, right? It was built for one specific business and not necessarily an industry. So when that got carved out, and it sounds like you came in fairly close to that, right? When it got carved out as its own product, what were some of the challenges you guys ran into there?
Yeah, no, it's a great point because, and this was, I think, as I've already mentioned, kind of the key recognition on Windermere's part is that, if we're the only ones giving input, the product won't be as good as if many are giving input. But the flip side of that is Windermere to this day remains a very large customer of ours, as you could imagine. And the consequence of that, though, is that there's still a bit of a remnant of, yeah, but we do it our way. And by the way, it's true of all of our customers, right? So, I think that's the hard thing for anyone that, as you said, built something out of necessity, and then it becomes commercialized and serves a broad set of customers. There are inherent compromises in that transition, and that's something we still work through together, to this day.
Yeah. So I'm very curious because this sounds very similar to how we're at Rebar trying to solve problems, but when you have brokerages that all operate at least a little bit differently, right? Have at least a little bit different needs, maybe have certain things that they like that they're already using that work very well and they're very ingrained with, but maybe need some supplemental things around that. And I know the life cycle of a brokerage has a lot of different components, but how do you solve for that? How do you create something that, is scalable and can be sold to a lot of different clients, but at the same time gives them what they uniquely need?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And what I would tell my fellow, subscription software brethren out there on this topic is you really do have to work hard to get this part right, because it can kill you if you don't. Yeah. There are a few things, actually. The first is just say no to custom. The temptation, especially when you're small, the temptation, of course, is to say, oh, we have this big customer or we have this big prospect. We sell to the enterprise. So we have a lot of large customers now. The temptation is to say, oh, yeah, we'll build that one-off thing for you. And that is just a death spiral because it's incredibly expensive to do. Most customers will not be willing to fully fund the true cost of development. Now you're eating it under the assumption that maybe I can reuse this in some other way over here. But if you haven't proven that, that's dangerous, number one. Number two, you're never done. It's not like you deliver it and then you're done, right? Software is never done. So then you have to maintain and potentially enhance this custom thing forever. And your customer, chances are, is not going to be excited about paying what it really costs to do that either. So now you're trying to subsume and sort of amortize that across your larger relationship with them. But the point is, it's probably a cost negative exercise, right? You're probably losing money doing that. And the final, or the thing that's the antidote to all of this, it's actually two things. To the extent that your product relies on content, which ours do, if you think about most of what an agent would do with a consumer, it's a lot of marketing things, it's presentations, it's things that yes, our technology enables, but it's infused with content typically from the brokerage and that agent. And so that's where, if you can direct them as much as possible to concentrate on that, and perhaps you have some design services that you supply, perhaps you have a bunch of materials that are easily and automatically customized in the form of including their branding and their images and so on, which we do, then that gives the sense of what they really want, which is something that looks different, even if the technology is no different.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the feature flag. And I know it sounds obvious, but our system is not customizable, it's configurable. And that's the key, because the customer gets what they want and not what they don't want. But from a delivery perspective, you're not writing code, you're flipping switches in your deployment team, in your onboarding team. And that, I think, makes all the difference. You just can't fall in a trap. It's so tempting, particularly like, say, when you're small and you need the revenue, but you just have to stay strong on that or it'll kill you later.
Yeah. Have you been successful at MoxiWorks, even with some of your really big clients or your prospects, at staying away from any custom development?
Yeah, we have. And I think the way in which we've done that, and this requires good customers, in which I'm happy to say we have good customers. In other words, there's a give and take where here's the other thing I would tell my fellow entrepreneur. The reason your customer is doing business with you is they don't know how to do, or they don't do what you do. Right? If they were as good at building software as you are, they'd be building it. Right. So it's super important to remember that. Why? Because when the customer comes to you often and says, we need the thing, what they're really, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, Nick, in your thing about, it's cool when somebody builds something because it really solves the actual problems they're trying to solve. That's true for every customer you have. So when the customer comes to you and says, I need a thing, this thing, they're really saying is, I have this problem and this is my proposed solution to that problem. But it's rare that solution is the best solution, because they're not software people, right? They don't build products for a living. So it's your job, and you need a strong product function for this, which thankfully we have, that can work with that customer, truly suss out what is actually the problem that they're trying to solve, and then build a better answer, a better solution that not only hopefully better accomplishes their goal, but is something that is then a common thing across your entire customer, or at least a significant portion of your customer base. But getting that conversation right it's challenging.
Sure. Well, so you've been successful at MoxiWorks for not ever going down that path with any of your, you've had a lot of experience with other software companies. Have you seen the pitfalls and experienced them of going down the custom dev path?
Oh, yeah. And I think, the most strident example I can give you is look at software consultancies. There are many of them out there that do work for hire. And somewhere along the way, they longingly look at production software and they go, gosh, we'd like to do that. And so they try to then take some customer project and turn it into a broader set of production software. And I think that's a very hard row to hoe. I can't really point to anybody that's done that successfully. I'm sure there are examples, but they're few and far between. So in my mind, if you have sort of fallen into that trap somehow, you just kind of have to lick your wounds, take care of that customer, and do what's needed. But you just almost have to start over and go down the production road clean and simple, because trying to go from one to the other is really, really, really difficult, in my opinion.
Well, let's go back for a second to something you kind of touched on when you were talking about kind of how the company was formed out of Windermere. These are now two separate businesses that really operate two different ways, right? One that works entirely on commissions, right? And then a software company. When it got carved out, and I assume there were people that went along with that too, that were used to a certain process and a way that their business works, and now you're trying to sell software. What was that transformation like?
It's an excellent point. It kind of goes along actually to what I was just saying. Now that I think about it, there were about 30 folks that had come along with the spin out, and this was in the spin out occurred in 2011, and I came to the business in 2012. And at that time, there were still Windermere as the only customer. So I think of it as a startup in that way, but it was definitely a transition, because effectively the company and then the people were configured as a consultancy, because you build what your parent tells you to. Mm-hmm. And so there was a big transition that we had to undergo culturally at that time. to move from that mentality to a production software mentality, as I've been talking about. And these are great people. Windermere has had, well, for a long time, a good culture, and so it made that easier than if it had a poor culture. But it was still a challenge because, for many, that was a big change, as you can imagine, and certainly for Windermere, it was a big change.
Yeah. Well, now that you're in that space and delivering software, I mean, I look through your website and there's a lot of different features, modules, whatever you want to call it, that you guys offer, right? That I'm sure have been developed over a long period of time. What's your process for going through it from a sales perspective? Because there's no sign up button on the website, right? This is a consultative process in terms of sales and talking about what their use cases are and what their needs are. And then I assume you would configure, to use your words, the system then to meet whatever those specific needs are, and therefore custom pricing that goes along with that.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, for those that are maybe in your audience that are maybe smaller companies or perhaps larger, but trying to go down a new road with some new sort of product or endeavor, I think the key thing you have to do up front is establish what the business model really is going to be. And I don't just mean, well, we think we can build something that's useful to this industry, because it has to go all the way down the layers to who's the user, who's going to pay, what are the characteristics of those. Everybody worries about TAM, the total addressable market. And I think that's one of the mistakes that's made in residential real estate. Everybody sees these TAMs as in terms of the amount of real estate. It's trillions of dollars of real estate to get, right? But it's the piece you have access to is this big, because the commission's 6%, but really it's 3%, and it's actually a little bit less than that because there's discounting, and then the brokerage only gets these days about 15% of that, right? So the thing goes like this. But so where I'm leading up to, and I'll give this as an example at Moxie, we chose very early on by choosing our customer base, not our product set. In other words, we said early on that the brokerage is the sun in the solar system of residential real estate. There are too many of them. And there are, by some people's estimates, over 50,000 brokerages, because a lot of them are, 1, 2, 3 person shops. But that the market is vastly controlled by the top 2,000, which is true. Yeah. And it has only gotten more so, by the way, over the last decade. So we made that recognition a decade ago and said, we're going to sell it to the enterprise, and we're going to sell these 2,000. And that shaped what we did from there. So for instance, whereas a number of our competitors and others in the market have said, we're going to produce an all-in-one system because we're going to the small end of the market and they just want a single throat to choke. They don't have the sophistication to buy from multiple vendors, et cetera. Well, that has very different implications for how you build your product than if you're going to the enterprise. And I will give you the example of how I describe to investors, in particular, how I describe what we're doing is we're trying to be the Salesforce.com for residential real estate. What that means is we have a core system, which, our most valuable piece, I would argue, is our CRM. And then we have a bunch of other products, but all that stuff lives on top of a flexible cloud-based data architecture. We call it the Moxie Cloud. But the point is, it's a very, like Salesforce, it's a modular product family. It's not all or nothing. Why? Because when you go to the enterprise, they already have a bunch of stuff. You can't go and go, it's all or nothing, take all my stuff, or I can't do business with you. It's what problem are you trying to solve? Oh, that thing? Well, here's the first product that solves that one. And then if you take good care of them, then, would you like fries with that? Here's another. And, you work it up from there. But that's totally a function of the end of the market we chose to pursue. If we had chosen the small end of the market, we probably would have done an all-in-one solution. And by the way, we're the first, this is 5 years ago, the first pioneer in the real estate space, an open ecosystem. So we have 175 other real estate tech companies that have integrated at the data sharing level with this Moxie Cloud infrastructure that we have and stuff. But again, you're doing that because you're servicing the enterprise. It would be very different if we were down here at the bottom of the market, right? So I think that's the key thing for entrepreneurs and planners and analysts to think about in detail, because you can't. It's a mistake, in my opinion, to think of a great product and then go, where can I sell it? You need to think of from the customer in, not from the product out. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. So then once you've got a good idea of what your particular client or prospect needs, and you've created this quote for them, how do you guys view pricing? Are you doing annual license fees, seat based, usage based? What are the different models you guys work under?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think it dovetails into what I was just talking about. I think, well, so firstly, to answer your question, we do multi-year enterprise level, full enterprise licensed kind of deals. So the same kind of deals you would see broadly in enterprise SaaS. And that has proven for us to provide a level of stability, I would say, both for us and our customers, versus the often month to month or annual contract kind of stuff that you see at the smaller end of the market, which, if there's one thing that I could impress on your audience here, it's the importance of having high retention. And the business model we've chosen inherently, if you can sell it, which we can, has high retention. I mean, our gross retention is over 90%, our net retention is over 100%. So that's what you want, because otherwise you're constantly filling the leaky bucket.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are at the low end of our market that are selling to either individual agents or the small brokerage, they tend to see retention in the 40 to 50% range, which means you're losing half your revenue every year.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just an absolute beating. And by the way, if you're looking for investment or ultimately to sell your business at some point, that's the key metric. Yes, growth has to be there, but the retention is everything.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, that's somewhat inherent in enterprise sales, right? Because the integrations are long, a lot of users who know a product very well, but you still have to deliver, right? You can underperform, your competitors can pass you and offer more capabilities, but how are you guys staying in front of what your customers want and continuing to deliver as much value as you can to them?
It's a daily challenge. I won't sugarcoat it, Nick. You're absolutely right. It's a dogfight. We have competitors like anyone else does, and they keep us honest and put pressure on us, and as they should, right? That's how capitalism works.
Right.
So I think the way that we have learned to manage that best is to have rigor in our product process. And we've made a bunch of changes in the last 12 months even about that, because what got you here won't get you there. We're over 50 million in ARR now. So that's very different than when I came to the company. We had 2 million of ARR, right? So the processes have to evolve, but I think that the key is in your product process, because you only have so much engineering capacity. Any company, Microsoft only has so much engineering capacity. The mistake that gets made is I find by the business, and it's tempting. I fall prey to this occasionally myself, which is, yeah, but we could find a way to do this one more thing. Well, no, you can't. Something has to give. And so having a strong product function that can adjudicate taking care of the existing customer and their issues, responding to competitive functionality, and maintaining and evolving your own infrastructure that undergirds all this stuff to begin with. You have to do all three of those things. It's just a question of in what proportion. And that's where having a great product function is so critical, because that's the function ultimately that's serving as the traffic cop to move your fixed dev capacity around. Now, do we have flexible outsourcing relationships? Sure. And that's helpful. But you don't have flexible money necessarily, right? You can't just go, we're going to double our capacity, because you may not have the money. So it's more important in my mind to make great decisions about how to allocate the capacity you have than to pretend like you're going to have a lot more capacity, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Something I want to ask you about on the website. When thinking about what brokers and agents do, right? It's very transactional, obviously, right? They're trying to sell their house or help somebody buy a house, who then probably doesn't do it for, I don't know what the industry average is, 6-10 years or whatever. A lot of time between those relationships. But I saw some interesting information about how to continuously engage with your customer. We talk about that all the time on this show, because we're talking about how to reduce churn, right? That's always top of mind, and staying engaged with those customers. So going all the way down to your customers, how are you guys thinking about that? Because I saw some interesting content on there about, stay engaged with your customer, offer them referrals to HVAC companies and things like that. So do you guys see that as an area where you can help them continue to monetize?
Sure. For sure. And this is one of the challenges. And I've not cracked the code on how to get the industry to be materially better. I mean, we're doing what we can, as you point out, Nick, but we still have a long way to go as an industry, I think, on this. So you're absolutely right. I'll put some stats where my mouth is here. So at the end of a transaction, consistently, because the NAR surveys this type of stuff, the National Association of Realtors, and others. But generally speaking, at the end of a transaction, the overwhelming majority of consumers, like 90% in that range, often say, "I love my agent. I would use them again," because they've had a good experience and they would use that person again. 12 months later, less than half of them can remember that person's name. Right? It's just bad because there's
Totally
no
believe that.
follow-up.
Yep.
And while there are many things to do with follow-up, and of course our systems help to automate and encourage those kind of behaviors on the part of the agent, the reality is there's a single thing, and this is also something to think about with your product. You got to find the killer app. You got to find the use case that is the one thing that everybody must do, and really get that right. And then, yes, you're going to do other things and add features and so forth, but you want to make sure this thing is a need to have, not a nice to have. Yeah. And so we have a need to have, we have a bunch of need to have apps, but one of them is called Moxie Present. It's what an agent uses to present to a consumer. The core use case for which is when you want to list your home and the agent comes tell you what your home's worth and what they're going to do to help you if they list it. Okay. And that is an absolute core use case. It's 75% of the use of our product is building those types of presentations. So we hit the nail on the head there. It's been a strong product for us for a decade. But here's the use case that goes to your point that is not being done. And we have it in there and you can do it easily, but we just haven't cracked the code on how to motivate, which is just do an annual property review. So as I said earlier, your home is the largest investment most of us will make in our consumer lives. How about you just come by once a year and tell me what it's worth and what's going on in the market, right? I don't want to sell it necessarily, but at least I know you've got my back. You're an expert. You know what's going on. You're following up. Yep. You care. You know all the things, just like your financial advisor does, just like your doc does at your annual check. Right? I mean, just do that. And by the way, it's highly proven to generate future business in the form of referrals or moves. The other irony is, everybody talks about Zillow and all the lead gen and their Saturday Night Live skits about Zillow, and Zillow posts their visitation numbers. It's like 150 million visitors a month. And all that. The reality is, go back and look at the data. You can openly search this on the web. Annual single family homes sold. It's about 5.5 million every year. Moves up a little bit. Like 21 was crazy because it was a post-pandemic, great relocation thing. But even in the housing crisis, it only dipped about 4. So my point is, that's the number of homes that are getting sold, not 130 million. So if you as an agent, the average agent, by the way, knows about 400 people in their sphere of influence, as it's called. That's not a big database, right? Just curate that, stay in touch with those people. And by the way, to answer your question is, on average, people move every 10 years. It moves around a little bit, but that's roughly it. So if you know 400 people, 40 of them are going to buy or sell this year. Wow. And that's plenty. To make a great living. 12 transactions is a good living for most realtors in most geographies. Yeah.
When you think about every business is trying to cultivate this relationship with their customers of trust, right? So that you stay top of mind and they come back. And of course, subscription is a great way to do that. But, especially when it comes to a real estate agent who's involved in one of the most personal and largest transactions you'll ever make in your life. And to your point, 90% would use this person again because you get into their world, right? They've got this trusted relationship that it seems like they just walk away from, right? Yeah. And so many cases, because they're not going to transact for another 10 years, that there has got to be a way to leverage that trust and relationship that's there, ongoing, not to necessarily to further monetize the relationship directly, but even stay top of mind for referrals and, things like that. It's like that. I'm with you. That feels like a very untapped opportunity for agents.
Well, yes, absolutely. And, this is one of the grand visions I have for what Moxie can ultimately become. And we are so far away from even really truly beginning to realize what I'm about to say. So I don't brought this out too often because I don't want to sound too, Pollyanna or disconnected from what's going on right now. We have plenty of fish to fry, but here's the way if you sort of squint at what we have, what do you really see? Well, we have about 450,000 agents now on our platform using various of our capabilities through these enterprise relationships, which for perspective is about 30% of the total agents out there, something like that. And those 450,000 agents know, because they're in our system, 100 million people in the United States, and actually in Canada, we do business across the United States and Canada. So my point being, what else could you put through that? It's just a sales channel. It's a trust-based sales channel. Mm-hmm. They happen to be doing real estate transactions, but you can put, mortgage, title, insurance, home services. But beyond that's the obvious stuff, and a number of brokerages do that. But what about financial services generally, and automotive, and luxury, and travel, and it's this amazing relationship if, to your point, the agent curates it. So that's my grand dream, is to get our industry and help through technology to get our industry to be able to be good at that.
Yeah, and even think through that a step further. A lot of people are buying within town, so they probably have a lot of resources, but especially when it's relocation, like somebody's coming to town, doesn't know anything, right? So you can be making all of these referrals to a whole bunch and introducing them to a whole bunch of people that you trust, and maybe monetizing that in some way. Just kind of furthers there's a huge opportunity here.
Yeah, there's the book, The Go Giver, too. You probably heard of that. It's play on Go Getter. Obviously, it's talks about how to sell through offering service to others, and I think it's the most powerful way to do that, especially in a real estate context. And by the way, the same is true we haven't touched on this, between Moxie and our customer. We can't just forget about them if they have a 2-year or 3-year deal. We can't just, sign them, deploy them, forget about them, and show up, 35 months in and go, are you going to renew? We have, and every SaaS company has its challenges in this regard, but we've taken that seriously for many years, and we're never done being better at that, because ultimately that's how you generate the retention statistics that I spoke about earlier, that really are the key to having a high quality business.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, and given that your client list isn't as big as some that are going, direct to smaller guys, maybe have tens of thousands or millions of users, but your customers, right? You know who they are.
That's right.
You can probably name most of them. How are you guys staying engaged with the way that they are using your product, what features they might be looking for, or what's going to be next in your product roadmap?
Yeah, we do that through a variety of ways. We have our existing account management staff. We have a good support team so we get inputs both more tactically, a little bit more strategically, through support and account management. We also have our product team that I've already referenced a couple of times. They also are very proactive, particularly when it comes to new feature development, of bringing our existing customers into that discussion and doing discovery, actual hardcore customer facing discovery, versus sitting in a room thinking great thoughts with a crystal ball, So I give our team full credit there. So we have the variety of those connection points. The one thing I think we could be doing a better job of, though, and I think this is true probably for many SaaS companies, is staying in touch with leadership and ownership of these brokerages, the CEO and or owner of the brokerage. I try to do my part in that, but I think we have a ways to go yet in doing that on a more formal basis. We don't, for instance, have a routine cadence. We do events where we bring these customer leaders together, but we're not doing it as routinely. The pandemic threw us off a lot on that, as you can imagine, and we haven't really found our footing again with doing formal events. We tend to do it in concert with other events. So, for example, there's a big industry event next week, so we'll meet a bunch of people there, but not under our umbrella, if you will.
Yeah.
Similar at the user level, we've talked about creating a user group, which we have not yet done. So I think we're doing a decent job, but there's a lot more we can and probably should be doing to further cement those relationships, and just make sure that the customer is getting the full value. Because we know, by the way, we can prove through data across this vast number of agents now that an agent that fully uses our stuff doubles their business. It's not theoretical. Mm-hmm. But we but we just have to make sure that our customers are actually getting that value. The final thing I'll say is, and this is always a dance you have with any customer, but I think it's perhaps a little more strident in the real estate space because a brokerage, that their big mission is they want to attract and retain agents, of course, and so they try to be the face of everything to that agent, including, for example, the technology that Moxie supplies. And in some cases, they're fabulous at that. In other cases, it's just not what they're particularly good at. But yet we have to do, I think, a better job of giving the confidence to let us do more of that. And we haven't done as much there yet as I think either. And so I would encourage the entrepreneurs out there is just don't rely on like the one contact that you have at your customer that you did the deal with and that loves you and you love them to be the key for everything. Because if that person leaves or isn't good at a certain thing that needs to be done over time with this, you're just stuck. And so you have to have good relationships broadly and try to control that as much as you can, as much as your customer will allow you to control. So you're not just beholden to your customer to execute that well if they can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll concur with what you said and agree that probably almost every CEO out there feels like we should be closer connected to especially our top customers, right? And not just have that, I don't want to call it a single point of failure, but like getting one perspective from that client, right?
That's
a lot of these guys are big organizations and you want to get multiple perspectives. And, as much as you can, going down to the people who are using your software every day.
That's it.
Right? They're the ones that are living and breathing it. And if they're not happy, they're going to start complaining. CEOs and leadership hears those complaints coming from different areas, and then they start wondering if we're using the right software, right? So
that's exactly
trying to get as many tentacles in there as you can is always a good strategy.
Yep, hallelujah to that. Yep,
for sure. Well, last question for you, York. What does the roadmap or next couple of years look like for you guys? Are you continue to grow the platform? Are you looking at potentially new industries or new verticals to bring this sort of software to? What's next for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we obviously do our planning sessions and talk about this with some frequency. I would say, while I think, as I discussed earlier, there are other industries we can tackle. I think we have a lot left to do in our core industry, at least for the next period. So I think our plan is to continue to innovate with the products we have, continue to also grow partially through acquisition. That's what I brought on Vector Capital as our financial partner 3 years ago to help fuel a growth strategy that could include acquisition. We're very selective. That's the other thing I would encourage entrepreneurs to think about. Just because a spreadsheet says a deal is going to be a good deal does not mean it's going to be a good deal. Everybody thinks that, the point of the signature, when you sign the deal, that's when the value is created. No, that's not the end of value creation. That's the beginning of potential value creation if you don't screw it up now from that point forward. So we've only done 3 acquisitions in 3.5 years since we brought Vector on board, and that was deliberate. We're very choosy, and it's proven itself out to be, I think, a good strategy. So we will continue to grow within our sector on that. And I do believe that in the next 24 months, and this is a sad thing to say as a fellow entrepreneur, but I think proportionally you're going to see more assets come to market because this downturn it's hard on a lot of companies. So we'll continue to be very selective, but I do think it's a time where a CEO needs to be proactively thinking about what types of acquisitions do they want to pursue versus leaning back and being opportunistic about it.
Absolutely. Well, York, again, thank you so much for the time. If the listeners here want to learn more about MoxiWorks or have a question about maybe some of what we talked about today, where are the best places for them to go? Sure.
Well, MoxiWorks.com would be a great place to start on just learning more. It's MOXI. There's no E. So MOXIWORKS. The other thing is you're welcome to email me, York@MoxiWorks.com. Happy to help out, grab a virtual beer, and help a fellow entrepreneur, whatever the audience might find helpful. I'm always happy to get a contact on that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for extending that. Well, once again, York, really appreciate it. Appreciate all of the insights that you shared with us today. Great for our listeners, and best of luck to you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Nick, and good luck to everybody out there.
Thanks again.